And on behalf of the SBDC, the Maryland Small Business Development Center, I'm Diane McFarland, and I'm responsible for our training program throughout the state. So I'm here today to welcome you, and also in working with the ATCC, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Cannabis Commission. My part in this is to let anyone know if you would like to have consulting services for your alcohol business, we can certainly work with you. Just reach out to me. I'll be the one following up today, sending you the presentation of these gentlemen. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. And if I don't have the answers, I'm sure I don't from these guys, I'll get them for you though, or connect you with them. So without any further ado, thanks for joining today. It is good to have everyone with us. We have a lot joining, and the panel, welcome. It's good to have you with us here today too. So Mike, I'll turn it over. No, I'll be turning it over to Jeff Kelly. Jeff, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the ATCC?
Yes, thank you, Diane. Happy to do that. My name is Jeff Kelly, and I am the one of the luckiest people in Maryland. I have one of the best jobs here in all the state. I'm the executive director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission. And I've been in this role since our existence for the most part. Prior to being with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, we were a component of the Comptroller's Office, where I served as the Field Enforcement Director of the Field Enforcement Division, which was the regulator for alcohol, tobacco, and motor fuel. And back in 2021, the General Assembly moved the alcohol and tobacco regulation function from under the Comptroller over to its own independent agency, which is the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And then a couple of years ago, when cannabis came on board, we got a role in that as well and expanded our name to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission. So really happy to be here and have an opportunity to present to hopefully some aspiring entrepreneurs.
And may I interrupt 1 minute before we proceed? If you have questions, those joining, please put them in the Q&A, not the chat, but the Q&A, and we will answer those either as we go or at the end. So thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, if I can just go ahead and get started into this then. And bear with us, please, everybody, as we're working together as a team. So as we cycle through our slides and we're running through our program here, just a little indulgence as we go. As I said, my name is Jeff Kelly. Very happy to be here. I'm glad for the attendees. We hope to kind of expose you to something that maybe you have some familiarity with, maybe you don't, but maybe you see some opportunities in this. First, a little bit about the ATCC and what we do. The Maryland Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, which I'll refer to continually as ATCC, provides regulatory licensing, trade practice, and general oversight of Maryland's alcohol and tobacco industries. And we work with the Maryland Cannabis Administration, or MCA. We love acronyms. We work with them to enforce law against the illegal or unlicensed sale and distribution of cannabis and intoxicating THC products. In doing this, we hope to enhance public safety and encourage shoppers, or consumers rather, to, I'll call it, shop licensed. Many times we hear people say shop local, and what they mean is, support your local businesses. I'm going to say when it comes to cannabis, THC type products, shop licensed. Go to the licensed dealers. This is just a brief commercial on all of this. Go to our licensed dispensaries. That way you know you're getting product that is properly labeled, that you have a sense of what is actually inside the containers, and that it's been tested as well. So I encourage you to shop licensed. Back to the alcohol part of this. Our purpose, our whole focus in the ATCC is to promote public safety, foster economic growth, and enforce state law and adherence to local codes and state codes. We try to do this by maintaining a safe, transparent, well-regulated marketplace for all of it, alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis. We focus a lot of our work on beverage alcohol today because I want to expose to you some opportunities, I hope. And this is just a primer in all of this. We'll get into more detail in further webinars. This overview of alcoholic beverage is just to give you a foundational understanding of alcoholic beverage in Maryland and to discuss something called the three-tier system, which is a confusing term. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail too. I'm just giving you an idea of what to expect. Also, I hope to demystify a little bit about what we do in the ATCC and even more so what alcohol means. And let me just say, when I say demystify, prior to having this job, and I've had it for quite a few years now, I knew that you had to be 21 to consume alcohol or buy alcohol legally, and bars had to close at 2 o'clock. And that's really all I knew about any alcohol law. Truth is, there are two federal constitutional amendments rather, addressing alcohol, one prohibiting it, one re-allowing it. But even in Maryland, just indulge me for a second, these are 4 volumes of laws about alcohol beverage. They're pretty much more, there's more law written about alcohol beverage than almost any other topic in our state. So there's a lot to learn about this, and it can be complex. I hope to break that down a little bit for you some today, and maybe even more so provide some resources for you to get better information if you need it. So that's what we're hoping to do. What we're not going to do is to talk necessarily today about a lot of this express business opportunities. We'll gloss over them today, and as I mentioned earlier, in future webinars, we'll give you more detail and really have some practitioners here who can walk you through a little bit, share with you what we can do for you to help you get started if you want to follow that route, and then maybe even if we're fortunate enough to get an additional episode, start to show you where resources are and provide some additional help. Big thank you, though, to Diane McFarland today and the entire Small Business Development Center, who are absolutely key and instrumental. They gave us guidance and some tips on how to move forward with this, and quite frankly, they're hosting it for us as well. So all the success starts here, and a big thank you to Diane and the team. And as Diane mentioned, if you have any questions, Q&A, not chat, the Q&A component, and we will get to these later on during a Q&A session toward the end. So let me go ahead and jump into the agenda a little bit so you know what to expect and what we hope to carry out. One is I want to talk about the divisions that comprise the Alcohol, Tobacco, Cannabis Commission. So we have 3 major divisions that do a variety of work. I'm going to introduce those divisions and leadership for those divisions so they can talk a little bit about what they do. Those divisions are the Field Enforcement Division, the Legal and Legislative Division, and the Regulatory and Administrative Services Division. Then I'm going to go ahead and, I'm sorry, my mess up here. Mike, if we go back one, I screwed up on that. After we introduce and you get a chance to hear from our division leadership, we'll talk about the 3-tier system. I'll run you through what I hope is a little interesting history of alcohol in the country and then in Maryland specifically. We do some crazy things, would sound crazy anyway, but they're really based in good reason. And hopefully we'll talk about a few of those. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can support you and obviously go through the questions that you might have, give you answers where we can, and then we'll talk about next steps. Okay, Mike, I'm sorry. So first thing is just the way we're organized. The Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission has a group of commissioners. It's an organization led by the executive director. Again, me, the very lucky person that gets to do that. And we have, along with that, we have a series of commissioners. There are 7 commissioners in total. The commissioners are 5 people that are appointed by the governor with different skill sets or knowledge and education experience areas, appointed by the governor, and then they are confirmed by the Senate. And then there are 2 ex officio members. One is the Secretary of the Department of Health, and the other is the Secretary of State Police. So you have the commission, you have the Office of the Executive Director, and then within the Office of the Executive Director, you have the people who get the work done. The 3 divisions, as I mentioned, are the Field Enforcement Division, led by a gentleman named Jeff Hand. The second is the Legal and Legislative Division, led by a gentleman named Thomas Akris. And Tom is being represented by someone who I can't wait to introduce. And our 3rd division is the Regulatory and Administrative Services Division, led by Andrew Waters. And so what I'd like to do is first turn it over to our Legal and Legislative Division. Now, I mentioned these different names. Oh, I'm sorry, Field Enforcement. My screw up again, I apologize for that. Our Field Enforcement Division, we'll talk first. It'll be Jeff Hand, who is, again, the director. Jeff Herndon, who is the director of our Field Enforcement Division. Jeff Herndon, take it away. Let me just say this real quick before Jeff takes it. I think part of my screw up is I'm Jeff Kelly, Jeff Herndon, and Jeff Hand. We all work here. Having the first name Jeff isn't a requirement to work here, but it doesn't hurt. But it does kind of screw me up right now a little bit, so I apologize for that. Jeff Herndon, please take it away.
Thank you, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Like Jeff Kelly said, my name is Jeff Herndon. I'm the director of the Field Enforcement Division, which oversees the law enforcement aspect of the Maryland Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission. We have agents that are spread throughout the state, covering everything from Garrett County down to Ocean City, on the Point Lookout to the south, and up to the northeast corners. We've got it divided into 6 different districts. 4 physical and 2 districts that cover statewide for manpower. We've got special investigative units that deal specifically with long-term or lengthy investigations, and then we have field personnel in our regular field districts. As part of the agent's responsibility from the law enforcement aspect of it, we concentrate on public safety, making sure that whatever is being sold to the consumer is a safe product as per regulated. And then also to do compliance checks to make sure the industry in and of itself is on a level playing field, enforcing the laws, rules, and regulations of the state and the local jurisdictions when it comes to the 3-tiered system that Mr. Kelly had mentioned. Purchasing from the manufacturer through the wholesaler and to the retailer. And as part of that, my field agents will do compliance checks, make sure that the records are being maintained in an orderly fashion as required, answer any questions that you may have as either the wholesaler or the retailer. And then we then make either, if we have the violations, we'll end up with citations or references to local alcohol jurisdictions, liquor boards for that. We also do a lot of the tobacco enforcement when it comes to very similar to the alcohol with the wholesale and the purchase from the manufacturer and then out to the retailer. That's strictly regulated. And then new to us, as well as new to the state, is the enforcement of cannabis or THC products themselves. As you know, the cannabis industry, the adult use became legalized in the state of Maryland July 1st of 23. And a lot of that came along with the Maryland Cannabis Administration, which is separate from us. They're the ones that oversee the licensing of the dispensaries and the product that is legal to be sold through a licensed dispensary in the state. But the products that are not approved or legal to sell or coming from a retail establishment that is not licensed, that's where it comes under our purview. And that's what we do. Our enforcement is monitoring and enforcing the unlicensed sales of products containing above legal limits. So as always, if you have any questions about any enforcement or regulation or rules, regs that may be confusing to you, reach out to us and we'll be trying to get the answer to you as best we can. If not, send an individual out to meet with you at your business. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And I'd say also, fair to say that your agents are very mature, experienced agents who understand that we're operating in industries that are in business as well. And I've always admired, and I'd say I want to underscore how your agents take the approach of compliance first. We seek compliance. We want you to stay in business and we want you to be compliant. There are a lot of rules, but we'll help you to stay compliant where we can.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so then next I would like to introduce Jeff Hand, who's the Assistant Director of our Legal and Legislative Division. And again, apologize for the screw up earlier, Jeff, or I want to miscue you. Please take it.
Not a problem at all. And good afternoon, everybody. As Jeff said, I'm one of the 3 Jeffs that's on this panel right now, and I'm the Assistant Director in the Legal and Legislative Division. One of the earlier slides, Jeff had photos of everyone, and the Director of our division is Tom Akras. Legislative's in the name because part of what we do is monitor new laws that the legislature is discussing during session, which is running from January 10th through the next few months. And Mr. Akras is right now testifying before the Senate in Maryland about laws that we're interested in, not specifically alcohol laws, but that's exactly why I'm here, and I've sort of thrown a wrench in the guest list, so to speak. The other thing that we do as the group that has the attorneys in the agency, and it's a relatively small division with 2 of us that are attorneys, our policy analyst, who has a background in public health policy and financial policy analysis, as well as mapping and things like that. And our communications officer who's on this call, Mike Wen. We are, I view us as translators of the very complicated laws that Jeff Kelly alluded to translate them for our law enforcement staff, our civilian staff, and also members of the business community that are trying to read these laws and understand what can I actually do in my store and be lawful. Part of that is us drafting new laws or regulations because the ATCC can publish regulations, and those control things like how the records are going to be kept so that we can check compliance, or how deliveries can happen between different business entities. So you have some detail that may not be in the law. We draft those things, help them get approved to make sure that they kind of fit with other parts of the law. The other thing that we do is answer questions from anybody that calls and has a question about how a law works. We can't give legal advice directly. You would have to hire your own business attorney to tell you how your business can be lawful. But we can tell you, here's how we read this law. Here's what our agents look for when they're doing an inspection. Here's what we think this law will mean when it comes into effect next year, and sort of demystify it a little bit. And then the last thing that we do is some of the hands-on legal work that has to happen in an administrative agency. That means when there is a violation of these regulations and there needs to be a hearing to determine if there's evidence of that, and there needs to be some kind of consequence on a license, we conduct those hearings or participate in those hearings. I act as the hearing officer generally for most of the issues that come here for those kind of things. So for example, when a cigarette selling business has sold cigarettes without checking ID first a certain number of times, and there's a pattern of that happening, we can address that with a violation hearing and take action on the license or issue a reprimand or things like that. Then the other thing that we do, which is a little less glamorous, is respond to Public Information Act requests, Maryland Public Information Act requests, or other kinds of requests for records shared with other agencies to make sure that the right things get into people's hands in a timely fashion and we comply with all those elements of the law. So again, we kind of work hand in hand with Jeff Herndon to give the answers to the questions that are coming up for him out in the field, or things that you may have and you want to reach out to us about.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, very much. I appreciate that. And to last but not least in our divisions, I'm going to introduce you to Andrew Waters. And just before I do, I'd like to say that pretty much everything that we do at the ATCC, all the other divisions, our legal and legislative and our field enforcement division, are all in support of our regulatory and administrative services division, specifically the regulatory work that they do. And Andrew's going to talk to you about a lot of the things, but we all exist to support them. They exist to support you and our actual entrepreneurs, our people who are in the business. So Andrew, please take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. As the name implies, we handle a lot of the administrative functions here in the agency, primarily of which is our licensing unit. We manage over 7,000 active accounts, fluctuating throughout the year, and we receive hundreds of new applications along with that, many of which are in the state, many of which are outside of the state. For our in-state applicants, you will likely have met some of our trade practices members, Lou Berman, of course, being the most notable. They're sort of our face of the agency. They do all of our pre-license inspections, and they're sort of the first line of contact that a lot of new license holders are going to have when applying with the agency. We also have our sort of research unit that handles all of our reports, either legislatively mandated or internal, that we produce to show the agency's efforts and sort of data sharing. They also handle a number of our internal functions, payment processing, credit control, things that our licensees interact with on a daily basis. And sort of our final group, which really keeps the lights on and the water running, is our fiscal services section. They handle our budget, procurement, accounts payable, everything that a new agency needs to keep running.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Very much appreciate that. And Andrew, just a funny thing, he introduced Lou Berman, and we'll introduce Lou later during our question and answer period. If you are seriously interested in a business in the alcohol beverage industry, you will get to know Lou Berman. You will know his name, and the sooner you start knowing him, the better off you're going to be, because he's a wealth of knowledge. So grateful for that. Okay, let's get into a little bit of what our three-tier system is in Maryland. And we're going to refer to that term a lot, three-tier system, and it causes a lot of confusion if you're not in the industry, because it just sounds a little bit complex already. It simply means that there are three very distinct, very separated levels of distribution in the way that alcohol moves from a manufacturer to the consumer. The first tier in our three-tier system. The first tier is the manufacturer. It's the people who bring alcohol into the state, whether they are manufacturers or whether they are an out-of-state supplier from another location bringing it in. That's our first tier. Our second tier are the wholesalers. The wholesalers are the ones who get it from our manufacturers or suppliers and deliver it to retailers. That's tier 2. Tier 3 are our retailers. That's where the product gets into the hands of the consumer. The retailers are the only ones authorized to make sales to consumers. So pretty much there's a very bright line of space between each of these tiers intentionally, so that one doesn't have too much control over any other. Each of these are able to act independent of each other. They rely on each other for product, but operate very independently on the way they run their businesses. And that's kind of an important feature of everything. So to explain that a little bit, bear with me while I go through just a little bit of history of pre-prohibition and what led us to some of the things today that we have, especially our three-tier system. So as I said, what led to prohibition? Beer. Specifically, brewers, mostly from Europe, had a goal pre-prohibition of having one saloon in cities, in any given city in the United States, one saloon for every 285 people in that city. And they were pretty successful in getting this. As an example, in Chicago, these brewers were able to establish one saloon, one legal saloon, for every 150 to 200 people. I say legal saloons because in addition to the 7,300 saloons, legal saloons in Chicago, there were about another 1,000 illegal saloons that had set up. Well, the way the brewers were going to achieve this goal was to offer anyone in our country who had a desire to have their own business, specifically a saloon, and had $200 cash in their pocket, the opportunity to get a saloon. The brewer would find a location and provide all of the equipment to this saloon owner. There was a catch. The saloon owner could only sell product that brewer made. They couldn't sell product from anybody. They could only sell from that brewer. And they had to pay a premium on the cost of the beer to repay that money that was used to set them up in business. You think about when you go into a saloon, a bar today, you have a wide selection of product you can choose from. Then you could not. You went into a particular bar or saloon, you could only purchase the product that that brewer supplied. That's something we call a tied house today, meaning the manufacturer and the retailer are tied. It's highly illegal. And that's part of why we have the wholesale tier in the middle, separating a manufacturer from a retailer. The wholesaler is not beholden to the manufacturer, and they're not beholden to the retailer. And so the manufacturer and the retailer are not beholden to each other as well. Well, back to our example. Soon there were so many saloons that the pressure in order to repay these breweries, this money that was fronted, was enormous. And it was all put on these saloon owners. So the saloon owners were trying to figure out different ways to market things. Well, some of them came up with the idea of offering a free meal. If you came in and bought and drank my beer, I would give you a free meal. Well, after a while, that started to become very prolific. One of our rules today is no free food with beer, still today. Well, as more of them started to offer free food, that was no longer a huge enticement. So some saloons started offering gambling, illegal gambling. As you can imagine, most of them started offering elements of illegal gambling. So that wasn't enough. They expanded into prostitution. They expanded into drugs. A lot of illegal, illicit activities were taking place in these saloons because the pressure for these saloon owners to repay the breweries was enormous. Maryland today, and most states, actually I'd say all states across the country, have a concept of temperance, meaning we want to moderate our consumption of alcoholic beverages. That's an underlying principle in most states. It is in Maryland. Back then, with this pressure to sell more and more and more and repay these debts, what do you think the pressure on temperance was? Temperance was not even a consideration at that point. Any negative impact that overconsumption had on public order, on the decorum, gone out the window. The concerns of increased crime, general harm to individuals, families, the businesses, the communities, all fell by the wayside. And then, as a result of all that, prohibition comes in. With prohibition, there was a little bit of a catch. There were three parts necessary to prohibition. The first was passing a constitutional amendment. That was the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment said no manufacturing, selling, or transporting of alcohol in the United States. There were a lot of exceptions to that. We aren't going to get into it, but that happened first. That was the policy of the United States. Then federally, Congress passed an act called the Volstead Act. That was the federal government's attempt to enforce the 18th Amendment. So the 18th Amendment sets policy, the Volstead Act starts to flesh it out and build a framework for that policy. But then the third part was each individual state had to pass its own laws that supported and carried out the Volstead Act. Now, Maryland's an interesting state in a variety of ways, especially the way we deal with alcoholic beverages. We tend to march to the beat of our own drummer. Only one state in the entire country never passed any legislation that supported the Volstead Act. Any guesses to which one that was? Maryland. Our motto, the Free State. Our motto exists for several reasons. One purported reason stemmed from an interaction between a Georgia congressman who denounced Maryland as a traitor to the Union for refusing to pass any state enforcement act in support of the Volstead Act and prohibition. An editor for the then Evening Sun, Hamilton Owens, responded with a satirical editorial entitled The Maryland Free State, and he argued that Maryland should secede from the Union rather than prohibit the sale of liquor. Maryland never did pass that legislation. Fast forward a few years, on December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment, second federal amendment now, is ratified, and that begins the ending of prohibition. The federal government, rather than get involved directly in alcohol sale in the states, told each state, you decide the way and the manner in which you want to allow beverage alcohol. They did offer a guide. There was a book written called Toward Liquor Control. They recommended that book as not required, but suggested reading on how to set up a liquor system in each individual state. Toward Liquor Control, the book, recommended that profit should be eliminated in the sale, in the entire business of alcohol. Eliminate profit. They create a state monopoly, and that would be the most effective way to control liquor. And some states, including our neighbor to the south, Virginia, took heed and created what is now called a control state. Virginia is the retailer of alcoholic beverages. So when you want to buy a beverage in Virginia, you have to go to one of their ABC stores, and you're buying it from the state. The profit, if there is any, goes to the state, no individuals. Maryland said, no, we're not interested in being a control state. So we chose a licensing state, not the best option toward liquor control, but an option. We chose to be a licensing state. Well, Toward Liquor Control said, all right, if you're going to go licensing state, then our recommendation is you create you allow for the state to be the licensor. So we at the state level would issue all of the licenses and very closely control all of that. Maryland said, no, we're not going to do that. As we said, we kind of marched to the beat of our own drummer. Maryland said, we're not going to regulate, or we're not going to issue licenses statewide for all licenses. What they did do, what Maryland did, was we elected to license and regulate tier number one, the manufacturers. So we, through the ATCC in Maryland, we issue licenses and we do the majority of the regulation of the manufacturing supplying tier. The ATCC also regulates and licenses the second tier, the distribution wholesale tier of alcoholic beverages. But regarding the third tier, the retail tier, Maryland has delegated the licensing authority for that to each of the local jurisdictions. So there are 25 local jurisdictions that issue retail licenses to their consumers. So if you go into a bar, tavern, restaurant, packaged goods store, that business has been licensed by the local jurisdiction in which it resides. We at the ATCC share enforcement authority. We don't issue the license, but we do share enforcement authority and inspection authority. But the local boards each regulate those businesses. And it's interesting because it creates 25 different ways of doing something in our state. But at the same time, it allows each local jurisdiction to kind of really be what they want to be. So what that county, what that jurisdiction wants to be. So it really does make a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about each of these tiers again with a little bit more detail. And as I say, this is only going to be an overview. I want to introduce you to what these tiers are. I want you to start thinking about, if any of these strike your fancy as a business, start thinking about these. And then we will get into very tier specific webinars in the future. We will go through each one of these in great detail. So this first tier, the manufacturing tier, it probably presents some of the greatest opportunity in Maryland in the alcohol business. One of the big reasons is there are no limits on how many of these manufacturing licenses can be issued across the state. Really, it's a very small amount, almost an insignificant amount that you pay for these licenses. The startup costs can be great. The equipment that you have to buy, the locations could be significant. And we hope to help you identify some sources to get around that or to get some help with that in another webinar, sorry. But the actual cost to get it, the licensing portion of it, and the cost is something we can help you with, and the costs are really nominal. So if you have a desire and you have the skill already or the ability or willingness to learn how to manufacture these products and a little imagination, you can become a very successful manufacturer in our state. You know, there are the three different types of products: beer, wine, and spirits. Those are the three categories that you can be involved in either of or all of if you choose to do that. We do have strict laws in Maryland that says when you're a manufacturer, the only way you move it, and everything I say is going to have an exception. So these are all the general rules. But the only way you move it is by selling it to a licensed wholesaler. You can also have tastings at your location. You can have you can make some sales of your product from your location in limited amounts. You can give tours. So you have a variety of options you can do. We move on to the wholesale tier. The wholesale tier operate wholly independently and separate from the manufacturer and from the retailer. They're completely independent businesses. As I mentioned earlier, they're not beholden to anyone. The wholesale engages in some sort of a relationship with suppliers and starts to disperse or dispense the product throughout the state. The only way a retailer could get product on its shelf is to buy it from one of our licensed wholesalers. Licensed wholesalers provide valuable services to manufacturers by bringing in new product into the state or distributing existing product around. They provide salespeople who train and teach retailers about this, and they get a variety of products into the hands of retailers. If consumers are clamoring for a certain product in a certain area, the retailer can, through their relationship with their wholesaler, make requests for the wholesaler to pick that product up, to start carrying it and introduce it. So they are very, very valuable to that. But another thing that wholesalers provide, really an ease of tax collection in some ways for the state, which may not be the most popular thing, but there are taxes involved with alcohol, like there are with everything. The wholesalers are largely the area where the tax collection takes place, and they're very good stewards of that. But also in helping manufacturers and their retailer partners, they help them really dramatically stay compliant with a variety of laws, codes, and trade practices. They become really quite the expert with a variety of trade practices and are there to teach and to help. So from the wholesaler, that product then ends up in the hands of retailers. Of everything we discussed right now, all of it, this is the place where the rubber meets the road. The lawful sale of products to eligible consumers takes place at our retailers. Mentioned before, it could be bars, taverns, it can be restaurants, it can be hotels, it can be clubs, it can be almost any number of ways to get the product, packaged goods stores, to get product to age-eligible consumers. Because each jurisdiction in Maryland is the one that licenses these local businesses, the rules change vastly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That wouldn't impact you so much because obviously you're going to get your retail license if that's the route you move in. You're going to get your retail license locally, and you're going to have to adhere to those rules. It'll be just one set of rules for you to operate. If you operate at the state level, which would be through a manufacturing supply license or a wholesale distribution level, you may have other local jurisdictions to think about. If I may, just very quickly with the three tiers to give you just some benefits of this, of what our system is and how it works. It's really, it protects the health of our consumers. It protects the economy of the alcohol beverage industry, the adherence to it does. And one of the really big things it does is it minimizes the opportunity for harmful products to get into our marketplace. I receive articles a couple a month of counterfeit or somehow adulterated product not in the United States, almost all of it is outside of the States, where people are getting hurt, they become ill. In some cases, they're fatal occurrences where people are getting bad product. Rarely does that happen in the United States because we have such a good distribution system, and especially in Maryland, we feel pretty confident that within our three-tier system and each of these opportunities that exist, our ability to track potentially dangerous product is fairly high. And so if it's dangerous, if it's for some reason contaminated, we can backtrack to where it came from and put a stop on it rather quickly. So that's a good benefit to this system as well. And as I said, I don't want to disappoint anybody in saying that we're not telling you how to get through all this stuff today. If you want to start business tomorrow, we're here to help. We're going to give you some contact information in just a little bit. We'll give you some guidance there, but we want to get into deeper webinars in the future to really kind of grab your hand and walk you through this if you're interested. That's basically an overview of our three-tiered system. You can see there's a wide variety of opportunities here. I've heard in the past, and I think it's probably fairly accurate. I'll say it this way, that it will be accurate. The alcoholic beverage industry in its entirety, from the various retail options to wholesalers to manufacturers, is one of the very top employers in the state of Maryland. So there are a lot of jobs provided by these businesses and just a lot of business opportunities. I hope you'll take advantage of that. There are a lot of ways to get into it. We want to help you through that. We're going to do whatever we can do to help walk you through. So what we can do is licensing and permits. If you're interested and you want to start moving on this, but you get a little confused by some of it, I have a great team of people that work in licensing. You met Andrew. His licensing team are stellar. We can answer your questions. We can help you fill out your forms. That doesn't mean what we're going to fill them out for you. But if you have questions about it, we are certainly happy to help you go through that. We have our legal team, our legal division, as Jeff Hand mentioned. We will give you some guidance if you need the guidance. We'll tell you what we think certain things need or mean. You may need to seek your own legal counsel, but we'll give you a lot of guidance here. You're going to have a really good sense of what you need to do. So I encourage you to use that. We want to be an education and a resource for you. So I would encourage everyone to go to our website at some point. Our website, very simple, atcc.maryland, spell it out, .gov, G-U-V, atcc.maryland.gov. It's great. It's being built out to be even better. We keep adding data to it and more educational resources. The reports that Andrew was referring to earlier are all on there. You can take a look at those. We have a variety of FAQs. It's a great place to start. You'll see when you go to our website, our first question is, how may we help you? What can we do to be of service? We want to be of service. So please go to our website, start there, maybe do some homework. Again, reach out to us at any point that we want to help you. So long and short, we want you to be in business. We will hold you to the rules. We have every interest in helping you succeed and thrive. We want to be good partners to you in your business. We want you to be very successful. I think if you talk to people who you know in the business, you'll find out that we're pretty fair players in all of this. And we just encourage you to apply and get engaged. And so with that, I would say perhaps we can get to a point, Mike, with some questions and answers. Does that sound about right? So, and just before as we're getting to these questions, before we start reading any of them, I'll start right off the bat and just say our next webinars, again, going to really drive into these different tiers. April 29th, we're going to talk about the manufacturing tier in great detail. We're going to bring some ambassadors in. We're going to bring practitioners in, people who do the work. You're going to be able to ask them questions, find out what worked, what were difficulties. Jumping into May, we're going to get into the wholesale tier. Same thing. We're going to bring in people who are currently involved in these different tiers, and in this case, in the wholesale tier. Tell you what works, what doesn't work, why it's a good business to be in. And then on June 25th, we'll wrap that part up with our retail operations. You can learn about the retail operations and what it takes to get into that, and what works, what doesn't work, and is it something that would be attractive to you. And then if we're fortunate, we may have a fifth webinar, which will really be about resources, providing a variety of resources, or at least direction to get to resources for you. So if we can, we'll go ahead to some of the questions. And the first question, if you'll give me a second to take a look at this, then I'll see if I can respond. So just bear with me for a moment, please.
Jeff, while you're reading those questions, can I address the group kind of generally about the Q&A process?
Please. I would love to have the silence and voice.
Sure. So for those of you on the call that have put in questions or are thinking about putting in questions, one of the participants here today reminded me and reminded us of one of the advisements that they give when there's gatherings of business members in our field, in alcohol in particular. As Jeff said, in the three-tier system, there are regulations about how these businesses interact with each other. One of those things, it's an antitrust protection, is that when we gather a group of people in this business industry, we can talk about regulations, we can talk about policy, but we can't get into specific things that would impact the consumer, like what prices are things, marketing strategies, maybe naming specific products and identifying them, because this kind of stretches into an area of businesses collaborating with each other that's not allowed under the antitrust laws. So some of the questions, when we read them, they may have things in them that we won't include when we answer the question. And I wanted you to understand why that is. It's a protection for you all as well as it is for us, because then when you enter this competitive market, there's no allegations of unfairness or competitors trying to hold against you something that has happened in a gathering like this.
Yeah, thank you,
All right,
Jeff, for
Jeff.
that. Yep, no, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Lou, I don't know if you can access the Q&A portion. If you look on the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A segment to that. And the first gentleman has a question about import export and how perhaps being able to sell some products that would be, he has his federal TTB license, import export, wants to bring product in from El Salvador to Montgomery County, and what he may go about, what he might need to go about in order to be able to do that. Can you weigh in?
Okay, if you were going to import from overseas into the United States, you would basically need the two federal basic permits. You would need the federal basic permit I for import and the federal basic permit P, the plenary, which is the wholesale permit. Now, you have two options at that point, roads you can go. You could either decide that you were going to sell to wholesalers in Maryland or to wholesalers in other states, which might make it possible for you to be what's called a resident dealer, or you decide that you wanted to sell to Maryland retailers and wholesalers in other states and Montgomery County, in which case you would get a wholesale license. It's very straightforward. You start with everything gets done concurrently. So when we read the literature says first you have to have your federal basic permit. And that's true. We won't issue it until you get that. However, it can be done concurrently, so you don't have to start the whole Maryland process after you've received your permit. So you need a location that's zoned correctly. You need a federal basic permit, and then we have a packet which has all the things that you need for depending on which way you want to go on it. Once you get the packet, you review it, and you give us a call. You give the trade practice section or Andrew's call, and we say, okay, we'll review it. We'll even come out and do a pre-inspection at your place to make sure that you're not throwing a bunch of money into a place that is not acceptable. And I think that's pretty much the 5-cent speech.
Yeah, and Lou, I'm actually going to tie that answer into, I believe, Holly's question, who essentially is in the process of getting her federal permits and is sort of asking, should she submit her Maryland application now with the thought of potentially having it issued May 1st? I would say definitely get the application in. And if you're interested in submitting it before May 1st, we do prorate licenses. If your location is ready, if your federal permits are processed, we can always issue it before May 1st. But yes, I would definitely recommend getting the application in. That sort of starts the process.
If I can jump on top of Andrew's answer there, our licenses renew. They end on April 30th and renew on May 1st. So if you're thinking about applying for a license that you want to become effective May 1st, you should probably do it as soon as possible, because you can understand that April is a rough month for us, and we have to renew before we issue new. So if you're do that, give me a holler and we'll walk you through it, but you should probably do it sooner than later.
Thank you, Lou and Andrew, on that too. I'd say, yeah, start now. It can be done concurrently. That's really an important point. I appreciate Lou bringing that out. We don't, while we need certain things to finish your application, we don't need certain things for you to start your application. And that's really an important thing because it can take a lot of time otherwise. And Lou, I appreciate that. And I would just say to Mr. Landaverde, I hope I pronounced that properly. I'm hoping that we answered that question. If not, let us know and if you need more clarification. But the other thing is, and Lou mentioned this, if we don't answer your question properly, or if you have a different question, or you just don't want to ask it in this format, contact us. Send us something directly. Lou said we will walk you through this. We have decades of experience, but even more so decades of practically walking people through this, holding you by the hand and taking you through. It can be complex at times. It can be a little confusing. We can really simplify a lot of this for you and help you move along. We want to do that. So thank you for that. Were there any other questions? I see any other questions right now?
Yeah, I think we had one additional one.
I see one about sharing this. Is that the one? I saw one about sharing this online. Yeah, this is being recorded and will be available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think we had a question about our statewide inspectors training. And Herndon gave a response for that. We are certainly planning on getting some together for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions? Right. Now's a chance, and we're happy to answer them. As I said, it doesn't end here because you can always email us or call us later on. But we're happy to answer anything else if we can. If not, I want to thank you all for attending. Really greatly appreciate it. And I am confident that we can do things better. So I'd appreciate any critical remarks, anything we need to do to make this a little better, a little more informative. This one is, again, not intended to be to the point of getting a license, but it's to start providing you with some general information to take away the mystery of alcohol regulation and just even getting a place, if that's been your dream to be an entrepreneur, to start to break that wall down some, and then following it up in April, May, and June with really practical how-to elements to this. We really just wanted to introduce you to the concept and topic in this one. If there are no other.
We got a few coming in. I guess my next one is applying for a license in Maryland. Yes, that would be the next step, Rodrigo. I think that is certainly starting the process. And then I think we got a suggestion from Bob if we were interested in asking the audience any problems they may have starting a business. Jeff, is that some you want to tackle now, or perhaps at a later date?
I think we probably, we may end up doing this when we have the practitioners here for each of the individual tiers, because I think we'll be able to give a more complete answer. We can tell people what we think, but none of us have taken that leap and actually become entrepreneurs and started those businesses. It might be best to hear from the ones who are in the business. Okay. If there are no other questions, then we will draw this to a close. Again, Diane, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate this. Grateful to have the opportunity. We hope that we're helpful. We want to be helpful. If we haven't quite hit the mark here, let us know that. We will get better. And if there's any interest at all in this business, you don't have to wait until our next webinar in April. You can start now and contact us now. But if you're just on the fence, it might be another opportunity there to solidify where you want to move. So with that, then, no other questions. I wish everybody a good afternoon. And again, thanks for attending.